So far, the Phoenix Suns organization have quite been able to prove that they could be a rebuilding model for other franchises with the way they have turned their team into a championship contender over the past few seasons. Well, what could possibly go wrong? They've really done well in recent drafts. They were able to find a star in Devin Booker near the end of the lottery. They've also hit on other high picks such as Michael Bridges and Cam Johnson, and of course, they've drafted Deandre Ayton first overall in 2018. Well, the team basically just handled their business how you would exactly want a rebuilding team to, because when General Manager James Jones thought that their young core was ready to take the next step, he took advantage of the team's huge cap space by trading for CP3 in 2020. Then just like that, the Suns have taken the leap as legitimate championship contenders much quicker than anyone would have imagined, which led them to an NBA Finals appearance in 2021. So having solidified their status as a clear win now team ready to gun for a championship, I think the natural next step for the organization is to be willing to pay their team's core pieces. And sure, they've already locked up Devin Booker to a rookie max extension, then they also extended Chris Paul to a partially guaranteed 4-year $120 million deal. But coming into the offseason, Phoenix actually had two other key players eligible for rookie extensions, and as expected, they handed out a well-deserved 4-year $90 million deal to Michael Bridges, and although unexpected, they also signed newly acquired sniper Landry Shamet to a reasonable 4-year $43 million extension, which I think are all good value deals. But what I actually find bizarre is how the team has failed to lock up franchise center Deandre Ayton to a supposed max contract, which is what he himself as well as a lot of fans expected to happen this offseason, which becomes even more of a head-scratcher considering how much of a double-double guy Ayton was, averaging 16 points and almost 11 rebounds for his career, while also being a solid two-way presence for the Suns' 2021 NBA Finals run. So what's good guys, it's Real Balls here, and today we'll dive deeper into DeAndre Ayton's contract situation both from a roster building and a financial perspective, and I'll tell you why I think the Phoenix Suns just might have made things between them and their franchise center more complicated moving forward. But before we move on, if you happen to enjoy this video, please do me a favor by hitting that like button because it definitely helps the channel reach more people. It only takes a second of your time, but it definitely goes a long way and it will be much appreciated. So let's get to it. All in all, a total of 4 players from the 2018 draft have been signed to rookie-scale max extensions this offseason, and these were Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Michael Porter Jr., with 7 other players from the draft class having signed their respective rookie extensions as well. And naturally, this would leave fans wondering why DeAndre Ayton, the #1 pick of the class, still hasn't been signed to his own max deal. Well, sure, being a top overall pick shouldn't guarantee someone a huge rookie extension, but regardless, I find it quite baffling that apparently, the Phoenix Suns brass currently still doesn't view Ayton as a max type of player, as reported by multiple sources around the league. Well, of course, we could define what a max player is all we want, and people could simply say that Ayton doesn't qualify as one, and sure, if we're gonna analyze the kinds of players those 4 guys like Doncic, Trae Young, SGA, and Porter Jr. are, I think we could agree that all of them belong to a certain group of players who can create their own shot and who can easily put up 20 points every game with the ball in their hands, who I think are also the types of scoring-heavy players that fans tend to vote as all-stars and who also tend to be seen as superstars in the making simply because of the roles that they fill for their teams. And sure, if this is simply how a max player is defined, then by all means, I think you could say that Ayton isn't a max-worthy guy, and this kind of thinking could be what causes the Suns to think twice when it comes to paying Ayton a lot of money, which is quite understandable. But despite that, I think you have to consider the kind of role that Ayton plays for the team and also the situation that the Suns are currently in. Cause let's be real, the Suns wouldn't have made it to the NBA Finals without Ayton, and sure, he didn't carry much of the team's offensive load, but he still was the team's 3rd best scoring option while still being the team's main defensive anchor. So just imagine how Phoenix would have dealt with guys like AD or Jokic or Giannis during the postseason without him. I mean, Ayton also actually put up one of the most efficient playoff offensive runs as well by averaging close to 16 points and 12 rebounds per game while also shooting a super efficient 65.8% from the field in his first ever playoff series. And considering the incredible finals run that the Suns have put together, I think it was just natural to expect the management to be willing to build on that by paying their young big man. But by failing to secure a max extension for Ayton, I think the team just fell a little bit short in terms of maximizing their roster building potential, at least coming into next offseason, which could really affect them long term if things don't go according to plan. Well, sure, they just got within 2 games of winning an NBA title, and they still have Chris Paul and Devin Booker locked up to carry a championship-level offensive load for at least the next 3 seasons, but they still definitely need a talented big man like Ayton who can address the team's other needs like controlling the boards, protecting the rim, setting screens, and overall just being a bullet-quick rim-running big man who can outmaneuver defenders in the playoffs. So at this point, I think Ayton has every right to be frustrated with this situation since he probably believed that sacrificing a lot of his touches and shot attempts to focus on his defensive growth was going to be rewarded with a max just when he was eligible, but that didn't happen obviously. And what's even worse, I think, is that the Suns have just created a situation that could potentially hang over them all year, as Ayton's impending free agency will be excessively talked about by the media, which could potentially cause some off-court pressure for the team as well. But to be fair, I think it's still a bit too early to overreact and to start talking about trades and whatnot, because whatever happens, Phoenix will still have the rights to Ayton as a restricted free agent, and realistically, the Suns could still change their perception of him this season and still end up offering him a full max deal by July next year, which if you base on cap computations could be as huge as $172 million for 5 years, which could even go as high as $207 million if Ayton meets certain criteria like making an all-NBA team or whatever clauses might be included in the contract. And that is just a much higher amount than any other team can offer him, as potential suitors could only offer Ayton a max deal which is worth around $127 million over 4 years at the most. And Phoenix can match those deals by all means because of Ayton's restricted free agent status. So yeah, I get it, if you're the Suns, you might be trying to play it right from a financial perspective in order to save some money, but here's where it gets really complicated. I think it's safe to assume that Deandre Ayton is pretty much viewed as a max-worthy player by most organizations, and he'll enter the 2022 offseason as probably the second most attractive free agent next to Zach LaVine. And because of this, you can pretty much expect teams to throw a lot of enticing offers to Ayton, a lot of which could actually be less attractive for Phoenix to match. And what kind of offers could these exactly be? Well, I believe some teams will offer him a 3+1 deal with the 4th year being a player option, which kind of deal basically gives him the chance to opt out before the start of the 2025 season. And why would teams exactly offer him that kind of a deal? Well, it's because there's actually a huge possibility that Ayton would want to sign a brand new contract come the 2025 offseason, since by that time he would have been in the league for a total of 7 seasons already, and that would make him eligible to sign a brand new max deal, which would allow him to have a salary starting at 30% of a team's cap space as opposed to the 25% that the league allows for players who have less than 7 seasons of playing experience. And by Ayton being eligible to sign for 30% of the cap, he could earn a projected salary that would start at around $48 million a year beginning in the 2025 to 2026 season, and considering the projected cap spike that would take effect that same offseason as well, then Ayton is just bound to make a massive amount of money if he again hits the free agent market during that specific summer. So if certain teams really want to land Ayton during the 2022 offseason that badly, I think these are just the types of deals that you would expect them to offer him, which are basically those kinds of contracts which would really work more favorably to Ayton's terms instead of the team's terms. And I think it's here where you can see how Phoenix has just potentially made things more complicated for them. Cause looking at it, if they just straight up offered the max to Ayton this offseason, they would have secured their potential young star who hasn't received any huge offers from other teams yet, and that way, they would still have paid the max of course, but they could have at least designed a contract which would have been more according to the team's terms. But since they've passed up on offering him the full max, Phoenix instead will now be forced to match any offer sheet that Ayton receives from other teams, and matching those offers to retain him also means matching the terms of those deals exactly, which they don't have any control over at all. And by looking at the free agency market next season, it looks like there could actually be a good number of teams that are projected to have enough cap space to go after Ayton, who at the same time also look like they could really use an elite young big man on their roster. Well, I think a team with huge cap space like the Detroit Pistons could see Ayton as a long-term pick-and-roll partner for Cade Cunningham, and I'm pretty sure that the team also wouldn't be thrown off by the idea of having lineups with 2 bigs in Ayton and Isaiah Stewart on the floor together. Similarly, I also think young teams like San Antonio and Oklahoma City could also view Ayton as a much-needed long-term upgrade at the center position, considering his skill set and how his age actually fits both teams' timelines. And the ability of these 2 teams to easily create max cap space at any given point, I think could make them realistic suitors for Ayton. So overall, by choosing to play the long game, I think the Suns have just opened the door for teams with potentially more attractive offers to go after their franchise center, which could actually be problematic for the team in 2022. While sure, the Suns front office and ownership might be right about how much Ayton is actually worth in terms of pure on-court production, but I think it's just hard to ignore the fact that this guy has spent last season proving that he can be an anchor of a championship caliber defense while also being someone who can impact winning without having to dominate the ball. And if he continues to grow the way he did last season as a player, I'm pretty sure an expensive max deal right now would have looked like a bargain in the future, and that is why I think this situation could make Phoenix regret their choices later on. So do you guys think the Suns should have offered the max to Deandre Ayton? Feel free to drop your comments below, and if you enjoy this content, please do consider subscribing to the channel as well. Again, this is Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.